It can be really difficult to land your first franchisee deal because it's expensive, it's unpredictable, and let's face it, when you've been at it for a while, it could be really exhausting. And so today, we're breaking down why that happens, what you can do to beat the odds. Welcome to the inaugural episode, the first episode of Franchise This. I am your producer, Joseph Lewin, and I am co-hosting today, joining your normal host, Sean McKay, to talk about how you can beat the odds in landing your first franchise deal. So, Sean, welcome to the show. Excited to kick this off with you.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thanks for helping us put this together, and super excited for this series.
So you've been working with franchises for a while. What are the biggest reasons that you see franchise owners or people who they're kicking it off, they're looking for that first franchisee? What are some of the reasons you see them struggle to land franchisees?
It's not too dissimilar from other markets when you just start off. I think a lot of people underestimate the time and effort and cost it takes to develop a sales funnel and lead generation. If you were to open a brick and mortar business, which a lot of these franchises start off as, people are going to find you and walk in, and there's going to be significant word of mouth. But to get the franchising going, it generally takes more than that. It's expensive. People underestimate that. And it's also unpredictable. You might get your first franchise in with very little effort, it might seem. You might get a few good leads in right off the bat, but you could run into a string of bad luck. And it's very difficult to predict and forecast, especially when you're small and starting up.
So yeah, with all those different pieces of the puzzle, obviously it's going to depend because maybe you get lucky and one of the first people that you talk to ends up buying, right? That would be awesome. Some people get lucky and that happens. Other people, they really burn through a lot of cash. So what do you see it typically costs new franchises to land their first franchisee?
I think statistics are really funny in marketing. Every marketer pulls them out of a hat whenever they're convenient and finds one that matches their point of view. But I think from my experience, it's generally somewhere around the total cost of the first franchise fee is spent in getting your first franchise on board. And that can vary dramatically, but that's just rule of thumb as far as budgeting goes. So a lot of franchises, they might have a $70,000 franchise fee or a $50,000 franchise fee. Somewhere around there tends to be the place to estimate. Realistically, the cost per lead varies dramatically on a lot of things, but we see anywhere between, on the low end, 30, 40, $50 to on the high end, $300 a lead.
Wow.
And it could take just as many of those leads to land a franchise. It could take 300 leads before you land a franchise. So somebody's got to do the math here, but it can be a lot. And people are afraid to spend that sort of money, I think.
Yeah, if you're talking about $200, $300 per lead, and you're just burning through those, and you have to get through 200-300 of those, I imagine some people give up before they even land that first franchisee.
Yeah, and they're afraid of throwing good money after bad, perhaps. But giving up too soon is definitely one of the biggest issues we see. Franchising is not for the faint of heart. And I think any broker, consultant, marketer will tell you that, as long as they're not trying to sell you in that moment. They're going to tell you it's difficult. It definitely takes a lot of time, money, and effort.
Yeah, you're saying you get into that 300 leads to land your first franchise. When companies come to you and they've been working on this for a while, what do you see the amount of leads that they've normally burned through before they reach out to you and try to do something different?
Yeah, we get a lot of clients that come to us after trying other firms, and they may have already done lead gen for 6 months or a year, and they may have generated a couple hundred leads, maybe more. Some folks have been at this for years. Maybe they're not after their first anymore. They're trying to get their 5th, 10th, 20th franchise location open, and they're looking for a new firm. So they may have 1,000 leads in their coffers. So that really depends. I think, though, almost always when they've tried something else, we're expected to pick up where they left off. And it's not always the case, unfortunately. A lot of times other agencies, like, they own the ad accounts that they just run out of. So unfortunately, sometimes it can be like starting over. And that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of franchises.
Yeah, that's incredibly frustrating, especially if you've poured tons of money into it already and you're diving into that. And then for either clients you've worked with or people who have been doing this for a while, what does winning typically look like? Like, what is the ideal that's possible?
A good win is generally something like a lower cost per lead, somewhere hopefully under $100 or around $100, and a reliable funnel that you have multiple people that are being disclosed the FDD, the franchise disclosure. They are being doing executive calls. They're doing site visits and tours. So you have people throughout the funnel, and you're getting a hold of somewhere in the range of about 40 to 50% of the leads at least that are interested.
I'd love to
Yeah.
hear an example of a client that you've worked with, that you've seen some success, and you could share the overall idea. And then I'd love after that to dive through the specifics of, what people can do to break some of the cycle of spending so much on leads and pouring through so many before you see a result.
I think a lot of brands target or try to target just the bottom of the funnel, the people ready to buy today. And it's just not the best approach I've found. There's a lot of people who are maybe interested in the concept or interested in the idea of franchising that needs some warming up to it. Plus, you're asking people to come out of pocket with potentially their entire retirement account or savings account. And they got to talk to their spouse or whatever to figure that out. And they might be doing a dramatic shift in career, like going away from a cushy corporate job into entrepreneurship, which is scary. So I think it's important to focus on the entire funnel and recognize what step these leads are going to be in and help warm them up and have those important conversations with them at every step of the way. So your automation funnel, your marketing funnel, your software that might be doing texts and emails and phone calls, that should all be about informing those people about those challenging conversations that they're going to have and those thoughts that they're having with themselves, those inner doubts. And if you can address those pain points along the way and walk them through the journey, I think you're going to be a lot more successful. The second tip I have, I think, to not burn through your entire franchising fee in the first go around to get your first franchisee is to diversify your channels. I think it's important to not only try Meta, but try Google. There's generally higher intent there. There's other social channels that might be worthwhile. LinkedIn could be a potential source depending on the type of operation. So diversification of your marketing channel. And lastly, also budget. A lot of people go in with a shy budget. They think they're going to be able to test the waters, put a toe in, and give it $1,000, $2,000 a month in lead gen. And then you got your marketing agency fees. You got your software fees, perhaps. You might have a broker or sales consultant, someone earning commission along the way. I understand that there's a lot of cost, but man, if you go in with not enough budget, you're really just stringing all those other costs along for a longer period of time, because you're going to generate fewer leads every month. You're going to still have to pay for that software, that agency time, all those people, and ultimately get to fewer qualified leads every single month. So if you can increase your budget, then you can do more testing. You can see which creative is working better, faster. You can get more leads in the door, hopefully more of the good ones as well, and be able to get all those people busy, your sales consultants, your brokers, whomever. So I think in summation, those are the three challenges that I see most people make.
We did get a question. I want to bring it up on screen because
cool.
I think it actually applies great to what we're talking about. So Amy asked, how do you know when to cut bait on the advertising?
Good question. If you're going to give up on your concept and give up on franchising, don't spend any more money. But if you're going to continue to do franchising, I don't know any other way to go out and get qualified leads or to get leads, period, other than to do advertising. Now, you might need to do different things. Try different types of creative, try a different approach, try a different persona, try a different channel, try different data. There might be a lot of things to switch up, maybe even trying a different agency. But giving up on the advertising altogether is just a surefire way to not get any leads, unless you're doing maybe trade shows or in-person events and you're going to try to build it slowly, natively that way. But man, it's a slow burn and it can be tough. Now, I think it's best, like I'm most excited when I have clients that have at least one or two franchise locations open, because at least there's something to vet. If you have no franchise locations, your very first one is going to be the hardest and the longest one to get.
Yeah, that makes sense. So along those lines, let's say that, to Amy's point, somebody's burning money on advertising. They're thinking it's just time to cut bait. What is, obviously, without diving into the back end, this is one of those answers where I think the real answer is it depends, right? But if you were to give one piece of advice that somebody should take a look at, what's something? Is it the top of the funnel? They need more leads coming in. Is it typically the follow-up? What do you see as the one piece of advice you would give if somebody feels like they're just draining money?
Yeah, it might be smart to take a pause and take inventory of what's happened so far and really look at all the leads and what happened to them and what stages they came in at. And maybe we need more education. Maybe we need to address different pain points in the advertising. Maybe our automation funnel is messed up. But I think if you can pause, take a look, take inventory, look at the creative, look at the messaging, and make sure it all makes sense, I think from there you'd have a clearer picture about what to do next. But certainly doing nothing and cutting all of it is, again, just a sure way to not get any leads. Quick stat, I guess I'll just say, I think it's 30% of people in the franchising space have realized that in 2025 that their budgets were going up, their costs were going up, they were spending more money to get more or perhaps even the same amount of leads. And with more franchises opening and more new concepts, it's an aggressive marketplace. It is going to take more than it did last year.
Yeah, and it sounds like a big thing to be considering as you're diving into this is just make sure you actually have enough budget and runway before you start spending money and trying to franchise. Because if you don't, if you're not prepared to spend at least the amount of the franchise fee,
then you shouldn't spend any.
Yeah. You should cut bait before you start. It sounds
exactly
is the idea, unless you've got a good runway and you're prepared to spend that money. Last question I'm going to ask is, what's the most dramatic turnaround you've seen for a client that they were spending a bunch of money on paid ads, they weren't having a lot of success, maybe they did land a franchisee or maybe they haven't? What was the most dramatic turnaround that you've seen in acquiring franchisees?
Yeah, there was a real expensive concept to build out. The total cost was somewhere over $1 million. And they switched from just targeting bottom of funnel, trying to find people ready to buy right now, to targeting the entire sales funnel and doing education pieces, posting more on their socials about franchising, really doing the whole approach, not just running an ad trying to get leads. And it was a dramatic turnaround. They were able to land more new franchises. They only had 2 locations prior, and now they're able to open, I think there's another 2 in the last year. When you're first starting up, doubling up or even getting 1 new franchise location a year is a big win for an emerging brand. So that was after getting somewhere around 1,000 leads of their own too. So I don't remember what their cost per lead was. They probably spent over $150,000 on that.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's a good story. Awesome. Sean, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom from what you've learned about finding your first franchisee and working through the advertising on that. We're definitely going to be diving more into this topic over the next few weeks, and we are launching a podcast called Franchise This. Look for that over the next couple of weeks. We're going to do an official launch on all the podcast platforms, so keep your eyes out for that. And with that, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.